Atsushi Nakajima is on the brink of death, laying by the banks of a river under a bridge. Determined to keep living despite the hateful comments of his past orphanage to him, he resolves to rob the next man he sees. Almost immediately, he sees a man floating down the river and ends up saving Dazai from a comical attempt on his own life. Noticing the hunger of the boy, he invites him to eat at the expense of his partner, Kunikita. While chatting, they come across the topic of their careers. The pair acknowledge that they are from the Armed Detective Agency, a renowned group of private eyes armed with supernatural powers for cases too dangerous for the likes of the police. Kunikita questions Atsushi if he had seen a white tiger roaming around the town recently, inducing a response of fear on the part of the boy. Atsushi panics, claiming that the white tiger had been following him from the past 2 weeks and was out for his blood. In the end, Dazai takes him to a warehouse to apparently lure out the beast. While waiting, Dazai remains calm throughout the hour, while Atsushi is convinced that the tiger had arrived and was stalking the shelves of the building. Keeping a cool face, Dazai states that Atsushi had seen the tiger for 2 weeks and had seen the beast for the same amount of time that multiple accounts had traced back to. He had also been in the same places as the tiger, revealing that Atsushi himself had a skill and could transform into the creature under the light of the full moon. When he transforms and attempts to attack him unconsciously, Dazai activates his own ability and stops him. When Atsushi wakes up, he finds himself surrounded by most of the agency, where Dazai reveals him as the tiger and recruits him to the agency, much to his confusion. Atsushi wakes up in a dorm room owned by the Armed Detective Agency. He receives a call from Dazai, who claims that there is an emergency. Atsushi stops Dazai from ending his life in a barrel and decides to look for a different job outside of the agency. Dazai offers to help him, and the pair eventually runs into Kunikita, who hurries them to a scene of an actual emergency. A man had taken a hostage and was threatening to blow up the building. Dazai and Kunikita play rock, paper, scissors to determine who would be the one to distract the criminal. Kunikita loses rock, paper, scissors and attempts to negotiate with the man. Atsushi is dressed up like a newspaper boy and successfully distracts the man from the bomb, giving Dazai enough time to subdue the man. The man still presses the detonator and the bomb starts counting down. Desperately, Atsushi throws himself over the bomb to try and protect everyone else. The bomb does not go off. The whole scene was set up as a test to see if Atsushi was the right kind of person to join the Armed Detective Agency. The president of the agency leaves the decision up to Dazai, who deems Atsushi worthy to be a member of the agency. In a post-credits scene, a blonde tells her subordinate that the tiger has been found. Tanizaki apologizes to Atsushi for his crude behavior during the latter's entrance exam. He introduces himself as a member of the Armed Detective Agency along with his sister Naomi. Now that he is a member of their organization, Kunikita asks Atsushi to uphold the agency's good name. After Atsushi guesses his senior colleague's former professions, Tanizaki receives a call about a client at the agency. Their female client asks for their help in staking out the back alley of her company building, having found a suspicious group, possibly smugglers, recently lurking within the area. Kunikita instructs Atsushi to go in the stakeout operation with Tanizaki and Naomi. He also advises the rookie to flee should he ever encounter Akutagawa, a mafioso with a strong offensive ability from the infamous underground organization Port Mafia. At police station somewhere, Akutagawa returns a lost bag to the police. The policemen apparently recognize him as a wanted fugitive, but he easily overpowers them with his ability before they could take him down. As he leaves the murder scene, the bag he left earlier explodes. Atsushi, Tanizaki, Naomi, and their client Higuchi head to the area in question. They arrive at a dead end, and she informs her subordinate Akutagawa that she has the targets cornered. Actually a member of Port Mafia, Higuchi opens fire at the group while Naomi shields her brother with her body. As Tanizaki angrily activates light snow to kill Higuchi, Akutagawa impales him from behind. The mafioso introduces himself to Atsushi and uses Rashomon to capture the Tiger Boy. Akutagawa then uses Rashomon to sever Atsushi's leg. Atsushi futilely attempts to gun down the mafioso until he inadvertently activates his ability and transforms into a tiger. Before becoming an all-out battle, Dazai arrives and nullifies both abilities with his ability. He reveals having tapped Higuchi on their initial meeting and listened to the happenings ever since their departure. In the end, Akutagawa retreats, though declaring that he shall soon capture the tiger in exchange for the black market's 7 billion bounty on him. Higuchi threatens Dazai and the agency, but the man claims that he knows about the danger of their organization, since he himself is a former operative of Port Mafia. As Atsushi awakens after his encounter with Akutagawa, Kunikita advises him not to panic despite having a bounty on his head. Atsushi notices Kunikita's dire attempt to hide his nervousness, suspecting that the agency must be in grave danger because of his doing. Kunikita warns him that the mafia shall soon return for him and therefore advises him to think about what he can do. During a mafia operation, Hiratsu of the Port Mafia's Black Lizard heads an infiltration in a workers' base suspected of selling Port Mafia cargo to the black market. After finding evidence that confirms their suspicion, Hiratsu orders his cohorts to kill the workers. The base is later bombed after the massacre. As the police arrive, Atsushi heads to the scene and hears about the danger of the Black Lizard from the crowd. Thinking that they might soon attack the agency in a worst-case scenario, Atsushi decides to quit the agency. He contacts Kikuchi and challenges her to catch him, thinking that doing so would keep his comrades away from harm. As Atsushi bids his farewell to a confused Kunikita, Higuchi assembles Black Lizard to raid the agency. Meanwhile, Akutagawa visits an imprisoned girl and attacks her with Rashomon. In the end, he doesn't kill the girl after seeing her unflinching resolve even in the midst of his attack. Black Lizard arrives at the agency's front door and barges in. As they begin their assault, the wandering Atsushi hears gunshots coming from the agency's direction. He rushes back to their headquarters only to find Kunikita, Kenji, and Yosamino easily overpower the enemy's forces. As Atsushi realizes that the agency seems to be more violent than Port Mafia, Kunikita reprimands him for leaving his post despite now being a member of the agency. Upon hearing these words, Atsushi chuckles and weeps seemingly out of joy, while trying hard to hide his tears from Kunikita and the others. While the agency clear up their headquarters after Black Lizard's raid, Kunikita assigns Atsushi to accompany Rampo for a murder case. Atsushi is initially dubious about Rampo, who apparently does not know basic everyday tasks, despite the agency members' praises for the great detective. They later arrive at the crime scene and meet Officer Minoru, who tells them that their help is no longer needed. He adds that the victim is his subordinate, Yamajuwa, who was found floating in the river that morning, and that there are no leads. At that point, the police have caught another person from the river, who turns out to be Daze, simply drifting along. Minoru reminds Rampo that their help is no longer necessary, believing that his own men are superior to them. To test this claim, Rampo asks Minoru's fellow officer, Tsujimoto, to solve the case within 60 seconds, but he fails. Minoru then asks Rampo to prove he is the best. Rampo activates super deduction, after which he claims that the killer is Tsujimoto. As evidence, Rampo asks for Tsujimoto's gun that should be lacking in ammo from firing 3 bullets. Tsujimoto stands in silence and later points his gun towards Rampo. Atsushi, however, restrains him. Rampo proceeds with his deduction, correctly pointing out where the crime scene was. Tsujimoto is interrogated at the station, where they learn that he was a spy for a Diet member whom Yamajuwa has found evidence on for corruption. When Tsujimoto confronted Yamajuwa, he threatened to kill himself to force her to hand him the evidence. In the end, Yamajuwa tried to stop him, but Tsujimoto accidentally pulled the trigger on her. Asking the Diet member for help, Tsujimoto was instructed to fire 2 more bullets to make it seem like the mafia is doing. He then set her body adrift the river to delay discovery. With the case closed, Minoru thanks Rampo for his help and apologizes for his earlier behavior. On their way back to the agency, Dazai tells Atsushi that Rampo does not actually have an ability. He merely uses his intelligence and deduction in solving cases, the reason why the agency highly respects the great detective. As Dazai tries another self-destruction attempt by eating a poisonous mushroom, Atsushi tries to snap him out of its side effect. After finishing his paperwork despite Dazai's pestering, Kunikita receives a new task from the president concerning the mysterious disappearances of Yokohama visitors. The 3 head to Rakuzo Taguchi's base of operations to ask for the source of an anonymous tip regarding the case. Rakuzo, a cyber hacker employed by Kunikita, informs them that the tip came from the Azure Messenger. Kunikita then calls a cab to head to an abandoned hospital mentioned by the tipster. Atsushi is introduced to the cabbie, an informant for the agency. As they investigate the hospital, they hear a lady screaming for help. They rush to the basement to find her left to drown in a glass tank. Kunikita shoots at the glass and successfully saves the woman, Nobuko Sasaki. She also tells them that there seem to be other abducted people at the hospital. Though the group locates them, a gas is released in their chamber, killing the captives. News later spread of the agency's failure to save the victims of the Yokohama serial disappearances. The group visits Sasaki in the infirmary, who thanks them for saving her life. Later, Kunikita realizes who the possible culprit is. He calls for the cabbie and names him as the kidnapper behind the abductions. As they correctly pinpoint his motives and having a connection with organ traffickers, the cabbie requests for protection in exchange for turning himself in, after he had kidnapped a Port Mafia member. Just then, the mafia attacks their cab and the cabbie flees out of fear. As Dazai pursues the cabbie and Atsushi tries to contact backup, Kunikita faces Akutagawa, though their battle is interrupted as the police arrive. The cabbie is handed to the police, while the group heads to the supposed meeting place with the traffickers. The building turns out to be the Azure King's hideout years ago, where he had blown himself up together with 5 detectives after his location was given to the police by Kunikita. One of the detectives was Rokuzo's father, and Kunikita believes himself liable for setting the bomb off due to his report. At that point, they receive a request to disarm a bomb from a client who turns out to be the Azure Messenger. The agency convenes regarding the Azure Messenger bomb threat, which can decimate the majority of Yokohama. The client poses a challenge to the agency to disarm the bomb by sundown, lest word of their failure would spread if they are unable to complete the task. Fukuzawa issues his orders to the agency in a mission to save Yokohama, uncover the Azure Messenger's identity, and fight for the agency's reputation. Kunikita enlists Rokuzo's help in tracing the bomb-building equipment. Meanwhile, Dazai spends some time with Sasaki, but Kunikita and Atsushi visit him to brief him on their earlier meeting. Nevertheless, Dazai asks for Nobuko's opinion on the Azure Messenger from the perspective of a social psychology teacher. She suggests that the Azure Messenger may be related to or might be the Azure King himself. Later, the agency contacts them that Rampo has returned from a case and has deduced that the bomb was set in a fishing tackle store. On their way, Kunikita and Atsushi are contacted by Rokuzo and Rampo, respectively, telling that the bomb is located at a former Defense Force facility. Dazai is also contacted by Fukuzawa, who reports that the cabbie has died. The three go to the defense facility, where they are ambushed by the enemy forces. Dazai and Atsushi look for the transmitter. Kunikita repels the shooters, but he then faces an ability user, who breaks the key to the transmitter. Meanwhile, Dazai and Atsushi locate the transmitter, but they also face a heavyweight opponent. With Dazai and Atsushi unable to fend off the man using physical combat and Kunikita trapped in the user's number ability, Kunikita and Dazai switch places through a wire gun. Dazai nullifies the user's ability, while Kunikita defeats the opponent with ease. Kunikita also recreates the release key through Dappo Poet and successfully disarms the bomb. Sasaki chances upon Kunikita at the cemetery and tells him she lied earlier about her significant other, who has actually died. Dazai contacts him, where they meet at the abandoned hospital. He tells Kunikita that he has contacted and invited the mastermind behind the incident to the hospital. Rokuzo arrives, though he is not the perpetrator and simply hacked into Dazai's account to also face the real mastermind. At that point, Rokuzo pushes Kunikita out of the way and is shot by Sasaki, the Azure Messenger, whose significant other was the Azure King. As she explains her motives, Dazai drops his gun onto Rokuzo, who fires at and kills Sasaki out of vengeance for his father, before he himself succumbs to death. Dazai is approached by a young girl who activates her ability in the middle of the streets. The next day, Atsushi tells the agency that Dazai has gone missing, but they think that he is merely on a typical excursion. Later, Yosano arrives and greets Atsushi, who is instantly left alone by his colleagues. She then asks him to accompany her on a shopping trip, where he ends up carrying a pile of her purchases. Along the way, Atsushi encounters a girl in a kimono, with whom he exchanges glances. While they are aboard the train, Yosano advises Atsushi to be careful at night, especially from the mafia's surprise attacks. At that moment, the train conductor announces an experiment, which turns out to be a bombing incident. After the explosion, the conductor calls on Atsushi to surrender himself. Yosano and Atsushi agree to catch the culprit and split up to locate the bombs. As Yosano heads to the front car, she meets the bomber, Motojiro Keiji of the Port Mafia. Atsushi goes to the rear car and sees the girl he met earlier, who receives instructions on the phone to protect the bomb at all costs. She activates Demon Snow and slashes Atsushi. Kyoka Izumi introduces herself to him, stating that she has killed 35 people in 6 months. Yosano is on the brink of death due to repetitive bombings, while Atsushi is unable to fight the girl's ability, wondering if he, alongside the passengers, would die. However, he remains resolute to protect the passengers despite his formidable foe. After being showered with lemon bombs, Yosano retaliates against Kaji thanks to her ability that allows her to heal any external wounds, including her own, during near-death experiences. Meanwhile, Atsushi partially taps Beast Beneath the Moonlight, enabling him to defend himself from Demon Snow's attacks. As he reaches for her throat and asks where the bomb is, Kyoka reveals the bomb strapped inside her kimono. Yosano tells Atsushi through the PA that the bomb has a remote detonator that can disarm the bomb. Kyoka reluctantly hands it to him, and Atsushi presses it only for it to continue ticking. According to the man on her phone, it cannot actually be stopped and tells her to die to show Port Mafia's fearful might. To stop the bomb, Kyoka pushes herself from the train, but Atsushi activates his ability to remove the bomb and save her. Akutagawa, the voice who had been instructing Kyoka, disconnects from his phone. Before him stands the shackled Dazai. At the agency's infirmary, Kunikita and Atsushi interrogate Kyoka, but she requests them to get her some boiled tofu at Tachibana Temple. After Kyoka eats voraciously, she tells them how she was recruited by the Port Mafia due to her ability and that Akutagawa manipulates Demon Snow through her phone. Kunikita takes his leave to make his report at the agency, while he instructs Atsushi to hand the girl to the police. However, he is hesitant to surrender her without giving her a chance. Meanwhile, Dazai is visited by his former apprentice, Akutagawa. The mafioso threatens him, but Dazai degrades him in return. Besides his past mentee's crude behavior and useless ability, Dazai claims that his new subordinate is far superior than Akutagawa himself, much to the latter's wrath. Atsushi strolls with Kyoka, undecided whether to bring her to the police or not. In the end, he unwittingly takes her on a date all around Yokohama. Finally, she requests to go with him to the police station, accepting whatever her fate would be amidst Atsushi's reluctance. Suddenly, Atsushi is stabbed from behind by Rashomon. Akutagawa and the Port Mafia arrive. He explains that a transmitter is implanted in her that traces their whereabouts. Atsushi is captured and Akutagawa brings Kyoka back to their base. Back at the agency, all staff are occupied due to a ministry staff escort request. Tanizaki reports about Atsushi's abduction, but Kunikita and Rampo state various reasons why they should prioritize their request rather than retrieving Atsushi. Annoyed with their reasonings, Naomi brings Fukuzawa to the room in order to settle things. The president orders for their current task to be suspended and to instead bring back their newest subordinate immediately. Still detained, Dazai is visited by Port Mafia executive and former partner, Chuya Nakahara. After the two exchange hostile pleasantries, Chuya asks why Dazai let himself be caught, but Dazai feigns to have any other schemes other than awaiting his execution. In the end, Chuya cuts off his shackles and demands to fight him. The agency scrambles in an effort to locate Atsushi, but Rampo remains adamant to help in their search. They locate the company owner of the truck who might know about Atsushi's whereabouts. Tanizaki heads to the truck's site and infiltrates the building only to find the people killed. Fukuzawa turns to Rampo, who, after the president successfully persuades him to help, deduces that Atsushi is on a vessel traveling towards the open sea. Fukuzawa tosses the agency high-speed vessel's keys to Kunikita and orders him to retrieve Atsushi. Dazai and Chuya engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Chuya gaining the upper hand with relative ease. As Chuya asks him one last time why he allowed himself be captured, Dazai answers that he did it for Atsushi. Moreover, Dazai informs Chuya that he delivered a letter to the Mafia's upper echelon that would leak Mafia intel to the public should Dazai be killed in his detention. In the end, with Dazai cornering Chuya not to harm him, the Mafia executive takes his leave and, as Dazai earlier asked for, tells him where the communications records with the source of the Werediger's bounty are located. Kyoka visits Atsushi inside the cargo room, but Akutagawa pulls him out into the open with Rashomon. Akutagawa spites him, leaving Atsushi curious where his hatred is coming from. Kyoka attempts to save Atsushi, but Akutagawa quickly repels her and advises her to continue killing with Demon Snow if she wishes for her life to have meaning and purpose. Kunikita then locates Atsushi, while Kyoka gives him the chance to escape after she detonates explosives to sink the vessel. Kunikita urges Atsushi to jump and leave the girl behind, thinking that they cannot always save others. However, Atsushi steals his resolve and rushes to save her, believing she can still be given a second chance to live a life beyond killing. Moments before Akutagawa finishes off Kyoka, Atsushi saves her and lays her at the side. Atsushi and Akutagawa finally face off. The Tiger Boy initially lands attacks on Akutagawa, but Rashomon's devoured space is almost impregnable. Nevertheless, Atsushi's repetitive attacks on the devoured space allow him to find its weakness. Despite Akutagawa switching to a long-range strategy to avoid contact with Atsushi, the latter lands a crucial attack on him. Akutagawa recalls his past arduous training with Dazai, triggering him to voice out his animosity towards Atsushi once again. Akutagawa continuously inflicts heavy attacks on him, but Atsushi's regeneration allows him to survive Rashomon's assaults. Akutagawa remains far away from Atsushi, but the latter uses his tiger's tail to trap Akutagawa mid-air. As Atsushi launches an attack, Akutagawa uses his devoured space, but Atsushi breaks it and penetrates through, plunging the mafioso into the water. Kyoka awakens and rescues Atsushi from the sinking vessel. As an explosion on the vessel goes off, Kunikita catches the two in his boat, thinking how Atsushi did a good job. Dazai hacks into the Mafia's communications records and discovers the one who placed the bounty on Atsushi. Meanwhile, Francis F., leader of the guild, perceives how the bounty approach with the Mafia has failed, though he remains confident that his organization shall soon have the promised land. Atsushi's worry about the agency's possible actions to take regarding Kyoka and her notorious record ends up dissipating after he finds out about their fondness for the girl. As the president himself called her over to the agency, Kyoka requests him to let her stay. Though Kunikita and Atsushi are initially against it, given the dangers of their work and how the port mafia may find her soon, Fukuzawa decides to take her in. In addition to a number of internal and external injuries, Akutagawa is comatose after his battle with Atsushi. With her superior fighting for his life, Higuchi becomes conflicted as her boss questions her suitability for her job in the mafia. She soon grapples with her position in the mafia as Hiratsu, Takahara, and Jin imply how she might be exterminated from the mafia. More so because Akutagawa, the reason why they abide by their commands, is incapacitated. At night, Higuchi is informed that Akutagawa is abducted by foreign mercenaries and decides to retrieve him despite her subordinates' disapproval of her plans. She infiltrates the enemy's base, but their number overwhelms her individual effort. In the end, the Black Lizard arrives to her aid and completely crushes the enemies. As she comes up to Akutagawa, he apologizes to her, to which she replies that it is merely her job. Later, Minoru and his comrade arrive at the agency to discuss with them a bizarre car explosion case. As they left, Atsushi is given the case together with Kenji. They gather as much intel as they can along Yokohamabashi shopping district, primarily thanks to Kenji's reputation. After they acquire a lead about Gojo Youth Association's possible ties with the car explosion, they directly ask them at their base, though the gang denies any relations with the bomb. Hence, Kenji believes their word and immediately leaves the building with Atsushi afterwards. Atsushi tries to persuade Kenji about the gang being responsible for the car explosion, but Kenji takes the gang's word as the truth. As they head along, the gang corners them and admits that the bomb they built was used to kill an enemy gang member. Kenji merely thanks them for confessing the truth, but a gang member strikes him from behind. However, Kenji is unfazed due to his immense strength and single-handedly defeat the entire gang. After eating a beef bowl with Atsushi, Kenji goes to sleep. In a post-credits scene, Dazai slacks off in the agency dorm, deciding to report his escape from the port mafia by the following day. Dazai asks Atsushi to write a report about the information he found on the benefactor who placed the bounty on Atsushi. As he discovered from the port mafia's communications records, the bounty was funded by the Guild, a North American organization of gifted individuals. Tanizaki barges in and informs them of the arrival of the Guild leader Francis Fitzgerald and two of his subordinates. Fitzgerald discusses business with Fukuzawa, wishing to purchase the agency. Specifically, he would like him to hand over their gifted business permit, but Fukuzawa refuses. As they leave, Fitzgerald warns Fukuzawa that an agency without employees would cease to function and tells Fukuzawa that he shall deliver a message in the morning papers. Kenji sees the visitors out, but he vanishes in the elevator as the group exits the building. The next morning, the agency watches the news about the disappearance of a 7-story mafia-owned building overnight, believing it to be Fitzgerald's message. Tanizaki, Atsushi, and Naomi look for Kenji, but Naomi vanishes. Tanizaki notices Fitzgerald's companion and demands her to bring Naomi back. Lucy M., an apprentice from the Guild, activates her ability and brings them, alongside several other civilians, to Am's room. She explains how they can exit her dimension anytime, but their captured subordinates shall remain behind a black door, and their memories inside Am's room would disappear. Moreover, she asks them to play with a gigantic doll-like monster and game of tag. The frightened civilians escape her dimension, leaving only Atsushi, Tanizaki, and a doctor, who appears to be looking for a child named Elise, inside the room. Lastly, Lucy tells them that if they can get the key into the black door, the hostages shall be freed. Atsushi and Tanizaki decide to play the game, but Anne immediately captures and imprisons Tanizaki. Atsushi counters Anne and manages to reach the black door, but the key is actually a feint. From the very start, there actually seems to be no way to open the door. Anne gets the upper hand, making Atsushi think that he could not solve the problem without help from Dazai and the others. As he rushes to the exit, the doctor stops him and advises him with game theory strategy to launch a counterattack on his opponent, encouraging him to save his comrades who had once saved his own life. However, Atsushi is captured towards the black door. Lucy turns to the doctor, who exudes a menacing aura that renders Lucy and even Anne frozen in fear. He tells her to look at the door, finding Atsushi resisting against the force, dragging him into the room. Tanizaki had actually used light snow to create a false door and for Atsushi to tie a ribbon on Lucy without her knowing. Atsushi pulls her towards him and demands her to deactivate her ability if she does not want to be dragged alongside him. Atsushi lets go, forcing Lucy to release her ability. With everyone freed, Atsushi tries to approach Lucy, but she runs away in tears. The doctor reunites with Elise and Kyoka rushes to Atsushi out of worry. As the doctor bids Atsushi farewell, Kyoka trembles in fear at the sight of the man. The doctor turns out to be Ogai Mori, boss of the port mafia. before whom his subordinates bowed to after killing James L., an assassin from the guild. Mori asserts that whoever opposes the mafia's might shall get annihilated, be it the agency or the guild. The end. If you enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe.